Okay, so our next speaker is Dr. Alyssa Boyd, and Dr. Alyssa Boyd is a family physician in Wasaga Beach and a consulting palliative care physician in South Georgian Bay. She is currently the medical director of Campbell Hospice Georgian Triangle and the physician lead for the local shared care team and an associate clinical professor at McMaster University. She also recently co-founded the Living Wish Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organization that grants end-of-life wishes to terminal patients in our region. So please welcome Alyssa.
Thanks. Thank you. And can everyone hear me okay? I want to say what an honor it is to be sandwiched between these two great colleagues of mine. So thanks for letting me get a few words in here. So I'm here to talk about the elephant in the room, because anytime there's a cancer talk, there's this. And that's because every patient, when they hear a diagnosis of cancer, a possibility of cancer, there's one thing that always goes through their head. And we probably get asked it. We often get asked it as a family doc or a palliative care doctor. And that's a concept of mortality. And it's at whatever phase and whatever point in your life it comes into your head is a hard thing to get your head around. The concept of uncertainty, which certainly accompanies every cancer diagnosis, is also very difficult. And unfortunately, our society is death naive. We don't talk about this stuff. So this can be so isolating to patients. Physicians don't talk about it, friends don't talk about it, patients don't talk about it, but we should be talking about it. Our region has great things in place for cancer patients that we can cure and cancer patients we can't cure. And I'm here to talk to you about those great things so that you guys will all go out of here and talk to your friends who have cancer, who are facing a terminal diagnosis. So the good news is, cancer stats in Ontario, that the incidence of cancer, though it's increased over the last decade, the mortality rate is declining. And that's because of the wonderful people we've heard from today, Dr. Mack, Dr. Christian Stevens, Dr. Rask. Everything we're doing is helping with this. There's about 30,000 projected deaths from cancer in Ontario for 2018, which gives us a rate of 186 per 100,000 patients. It's not a huge number, and it's actually a rate that's declining every year. So that's a very reassuring graph. We're seeing the number go down. So the history of mortality, it used to be a huge family affair. In the Middle Ages, it was feared, but it was accepted. It was very tied into the church. So people saw that as a chance, the prolonged process was a chance to confess your sins and to reconcile your life. It was painful, and the good Christians were told to bear their pain. It was kind of what you did as a good Christian. In the Renaissance era, it kind of got separated from the church and was more scientific. And this fear about being buried alive kind of came about. And you see all these coffins with little bells on them, so that if you ever were, you could ring the bell. I didn't want to look up the stats on how often that happened, because we'll just keep this positive. And then the 1800s, it became less about the person and more about the family. And the concept of separating from your family came into the grief. And the concept of the afterlife came about, and people started communicating with the dead, and Ouija boards and seances came about. No matter all these changes, it was always still family-centered. And in our modern age, despite all these wonderful advances in medicine, we've really depersonalized death. It now takes place away from home, in hospitals, surrounded by strangers. And people have a fear of separating, and a lot of people leave the home at that time. So this is Washington on his deathbed. And this is what it looks like today sometimes. So I'm happy to tell, there's a quote from the New York Times I like, that Western culture has become too squeamish about talking about death. The silence impoverishes the lives leading up to it. So I'm happy to tell you that there's a great movement, a hospice movement. In fact, the term palliative care was coined by a Canadian gentleman. And he used the term to bridge, it's a Latin term, but to bridge the French and English version so we'd have a consistent term. And the idea of palliative care and hospice medicine is a shift back to the person. So it focuses on the family, on the goals of care, on the spiritual and the physical. And it sort of moves the medical to the background and the person as a whole to the foreground. It focuses on keeping the patient at home or in a home-like setting. And I'm happy to say our region is kind of leading the change in this in several ways. It's not just here, it's happening all over. There's something called the positive death movement, which is probably a bit of an oxymoron, but it's sort of equating it to labor, you know, the unknown, the pain, the need for support, and this idea that we need to break the taboo. So we're seeing, I don't know if you've heard of any of these things, death cafes where people sit around and talk about it. There are all kinds of blogs, morbid anatomy blog, cultures of death blog. We now have doulas that do end-of-life care, not just labor and delivery. That started in 2003 by a social worker. There are institutes on the art of dying. There's even a Disney movie called Coco where a little boy encounters death. And you know it's modern time when we have an app for it. So we have the We Croak app, which reminds you 5 times a day of your own mortality. It's based on Bhutanese folklore that it will bring more meaning to your life if you have your app go off 5 times a day for that. So locally what we have Hospice Georgian Triangle, which has been around for a long time, since 1987. And we often think of it now as Campbell House, but actually it started as an outreach program into the community to sit with people, to give spiritual support to families in the community. So we now have the Lighthouse Integrated Care, which is a navigator that will go out and be assigned to each family when one of the members is facing a terminal diagnosis, and stay with them through their journey and offer support to the patient and the family. We have lots of programs at hospice, grief support groups, volunteer programs, art therapy, Reiki, Tai Chi, reflections group. There's a book club, practical skills for caregivers, and groups on how to manage chronic disease. We have Campbell House Hospice, which is just like 100 meters that way. It's a 6-bed residential hospice for end-of-life care where you get a nurse and a PSW around the clock. However, it's designed to look like a home and feel like home. It's fully funded under OHIP, and the number one question I get asked, no, you don't have to pay for your TV and all the channels that you get. So it's, you know, family-friendly, pets can visit, there's no visiting hours, and there's homemade cookies and lots of support. And that's a picture of it right there. Just last year, we started something called the Share Care Team. And the vision of this is really to identify and support every patient in our region who is facing a life-limiting illness in their last year of life. So what we want to make sure of is that they don't fall through the cracks. And at every stage in that final year, when they need something, that it's delivered to them in a timely manner. We want to eliminate visits to emerge in the final year of life. We want to support the families. And we want to make sure that we keep up to speed with everyone. So we have weekly meetings where we sit down and we talk about everyone on the list. How are they doing? What do they need right now? What can we do to best support them and their goals? And then the thing I'm most excited about today is to talk about the Living Wish Foundation, which we just established thanks to the support of our Larry Hall here, thank you, from the CGMH Wellness Grant, helped get us off our feet this year. So it's a not-for-profit organization that actually grants wishes to adults facing a terminal illness. So everyone's heard of Make-A-Wish Foundation for kids. So nothing like this exists in Canada for adults, which is surprising because it's very simple. And it's amazing what a difference it can do for families when you take the focus away from the medical and the illness and all the appointments and needles and procedures and focus it on a wish. And it reframes hope, and it reminds someone that they can keep living even though they might be dying. So I'm happy to say we granted our first wish last weekend. Woohoo! It was great. It was a gentleman who had 2 wishes. I'll tell you the second one because you'll. The first wish was to have a band come and play for him on his farm, and he wanted to play his harmonica with this band. And they came and they played on his farm, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and he sat in his favorite chair under his tree, and he had all his friends and family around. And the second part of his wish is that he always wanted to be in the newspaper, which was fantastic, which is why I'm allowed to talk about it. So you can check it out in mycollingwood.ca. There's a news story on it as well. So most of the wishes, though, are simple. You know, favorite flavor of ice cream, one last visit to the cottage, an anniversary dinner. So we're really looking forward to establishing this in our community and building it. We're hoping to get a transport vehicle shortly, so you can check us out on our website there as well. So in summary, if you or a friend are facing a cancer diagnosis, please address the elephant in the room. Don't leave them to their own thoughts. And hopefully I've shown you some things that you can reassure them about, some of the positive things and resources available in our community. And so let's try to take this and make it more like that.
Great, thank you, Dr. Boyd. Great, thank you so much, Alyssa. I'll just see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I think we can always use more beds. The question is, how busy is our community? And like, you look at the hospital, we have people in the hallways. So we have lots of ideas of how we could use more beds and get funding for those 4 beds that we have unfilled. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great, thank you.